Gentlemen, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Again, before we get started with the agenda, if anybody would care to speak during the public comment section regarding this specific issue, you can please sign up over here and they'll forward your information up. I just want to make a couple of comments regarding public comments. When you come to the podium, please state your name and address for the public record. In turn, be respectful of the public forum that you're in. This public meeting is recorded and therefore becomes a matter of public record, as does all correspondence on this issue directed to county officials. Please try to avoid repeating comments already offered. Place your cell phones on silent mode, please. If you need to speak with the caller, please step outside the room. And just a reminder, the Planning Commission is an advisory body to County Council. As such, the Planning Commission recommendation on this issue goes forward to County Council through the Land Use and Community Services Committee, then to County Council for the review and voting determination. So the Planning Commission recommendation is a step in the review process and voting determination by County Council. Okay. FOIA public notification's been made. We have the minutes for approval from July 6th. Any comments, questions? Have a motion for approval?
Make a motion that we approve the minutes.
Second, do we need a second? Do we have a second? All those in favor? Aye. All right. Any negative? All right. Okay, first order of business. Are any citizen would like to comment on an issue that's not on the agenda, just has a burning issue that they wanted to talk about? That's your opportunity. Okay. Hearing none, then we'll move forward to the action items. We have one major item this evening, the zoning map amendment, rezoning request for 71.54 acres located at 1691 Okatee Highway from T2 Rural to T4 Neighborhood Center and T3 Neighborhood using a Village Place type overlay. This was deferred from our last meeting on July 6, 2023 via continuance request. Mark?
Yep, so as you said, this was deferred from the July 6, 2023 meeting. At that meeting, staff kind of went over of what the kind of nuts and bolts of a place type overlay was. We had some really good conversation in that. Hopefully everybody was able to leave that meeting understanding a little bit more about the place type overlay, what it is, and the type of tool that the Community Development Code allows it, and how it can be applied. And then in that, I think there was a lot of conversation and a lot of questions, and that kind of led to the Planning Commission's desire to make a motion to table this item till tonight. And it's my understanding that the applicant and their team have put together some presentations for you all to go through that. And unless you have any questions for me, I'm going to let them jump right in and kind of continue from where we left off.
Do you have anything from the county, the transportation issue? Anything you want to discuss further from the county, some perspective?
Well, I think there's somebody, I think there's a transportation. I think that's a part of the presentation.
Part of, from the applicant side?
Yes.
Okay. Questions of Mark?
I mean, I'll be here to answer, but I just thought we'd just get right in and kind of pick up where we left off.
Okay.
All right.
All right. And who would like to speak on behalf of the applicant? Sir?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. My name is Kevin Dukes, and I am the attorney for the applicant. I am with Harvey and Batty Law Firm, and other members of our team tonight here are Dan Kiefer with Whitmer, Jones and Kiefer, and then Dylan Turner with Kimley Horn. So he's going to be our traffic engineer to hopefully answer some of those questions. First, I'd like to say thank you for allowing us the opportunity to have a little more of your time. Public has driven up again, so I appreciate that. I know Ms. McMillan takes the public comment very seriously. We heard that. We heard what they said. So I think that what we'd like to show tonight is that we've taken that into account along with what the commission, the comments and the questions that were raised last time. We've addressed some of those. Some of the things which maybe we didn't make changes to, we're trying to provide more information so that it can be clear exactly what we're looking for. So in our last hearing, there were lots of discussion, that's true, but there were certain key issues which kind of raised to the surface, whether that be through the public comment or through the commission's direct questioning. And those were the encroachment on the community. So how this new community was going to impact the existing homes that were there. There was, Mr. Chairman and multiple members of the commission had lots of questions regarding traffic impacts to SC 170 and the greater 170 corridor, and also how that fits in to the longer range plan of the county, what's in place now, what may be in place in the future. And so we hope that through tonight, we can show you that this project is actually part of a solution for both Cherry Point Road and the 170 corridor, and not a problem, but rather providing off-site improvements, which I think, Mr. Chairman, you had asked for very specifically. What are we doing off-site from here that are going to be implemented into the 170 corridor? And our traffic engineer is here to show that there are specific items which the developer will implement, pay for, which are included currently in the larger Super Street plan for SC 170. And so this is an opportunity to work with the committees, council, staff to implement those roadway improvements without cost to the taxpayers, and quite frankly, probably long before they would be implemented in the Super Street corridor plan. And so we're going to be very specific about some of those items, and we'll also be able to answer those questions. The third item was Cherry Point Road. We have heard from some of the community that it's not in great shape now. It's too narrow. There are potholes, and it won't hold this capacity, and it won't hold the existing capacity that's being built around it. There is a plan in place, and actually our traffic engineer can speak to the plan in place that the county has. With us accessing onto this road, the developer accessing on it, there's going to have to be an encroachment, granted with the county. That's an opportunity for the county to work with the developer to work on Cherry Point Road as well. And there's some specific off-site improvements to Cherry Point Road, which will be discussed too. So we think that Cherry Point Road will be improved. That will better service the immediate community, the school, and the larger SC 170 corridor, and help that become more functional. And if I could, I bounced past the encroachment for the community. I kind of wanted to wait on that because that's important. A big change, Commissioner Riedel, that you had mentioned was impact and density, and also the buffer that came up. And so one of the significant changes, which Mr. Kiefer will speak to, is the buffer. So it's been more than doubled. It went from 20 feet to 50 feet. Again, that's another item where we could continue on that discussion with staff to determine how that buffer looks, how it's determined. But what we're presenting now was the change of 50 feet as opposed to the 20 feet around that existing neighborhood. The other item that I wanted to be a little bit more specific about, and this was on us, we didn't do this last time, this was our fault, is that to the community, we wanted to be a little bit more specific about what was to be built around your homes and your existing community. With the village type overlay, it radiates out. I'm sure everybody on this commission knows this, and probably most of the public does. There starts at a more dense center, at the village center, so to speak, and then goes back. The back portion of this is towards the existing community. And the plan that we have are for single-family homes, significantly less dense than the overall density that is allowed under T3. And that's the idea, is that you go from less dense to more dense. And I think we've got some examples of what we would hope that might look like, and honestly what the code calls for under T3. And so I told the team it was very important, I thought, to the community to see graphically and pictorially what exactly that might look like. And so a lot of folks have bad images in their mind, quite honestly, I would too, about what might be built. So we wanted to provide some examples of we wanted to show kind of the lot lines and just generally show what that looks like in a single family format near the community. And then also to show what the code currently calls for, some images of what we think would be a good thing to mimic. It's not exact, but it is what the code would provide. So hopefully to give some assurances that what everybody expects to be the worst is not what we're asking. And so with that, I mean, there was some other information provided to you in your packet, but I think those were the key things that everybody in this room was concerned about before. And so we really want to hit those and be specific as to those items. And at the end of this, I would just like to finish up, and I'm happy to come back and answer questions as we get through this, but we're asking the commission tonight for a recommendation or an approval that this is in compliance with the comprehensive plan. We believe that it is. The comprehensive plan shows a village type in this area. We believe that the village type, place type overlay is a great way to accomplish this. It gives further public input through both open forums to committee and to council, but also public input through the staff. The county has staff that are experts in this area, and this gives the staff the opportunity to work with the developer to craft a development agreement on all the minute details, stormwater, runoff, all of that stuff, to craft a plan that works for the community. And they're going to have the community in mind. And so I would just like to say that I think that this is a great opportunity to create a quality development which achieves the goals that the council set out in the comprehensive plan, but to be done in a way that allows for folks to work together. And so we're asking tonight for, number one, that acknowledgement that, yes, this is the comprehensive plan calls for that village place type in this location. We think it's clear, and Mr. Kiefer's going to go through a little bit of that. But we understand that there may be some qualifications or questions remaining from this board or this commission as we move forward. We get that. We understand it. That's why we need to move to the work to be done with staff and the development agreement. And so if those things exist, we would ask, that those be laid out in qualifications maybe to what you send to council, so that there are some more directives to it and not just an up or down, but something that's a little bit more informative as we move forward. So with that being said, I'll just leave you with, this is not the end. It's just the beginning. There's a lot more to be done from the standpoint of public hearings, work with staff, the development agreement, with the land use committee, with council, with multiple readings. So we're headed in that direction. We're ready to get started, and I thank you for the time that you've taken, allowing us additional time tonight. So with that, I'll let Dan.
Before you leave,
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Dukes, anybody would like to ask a question, Mr. Dukes, at this point?
I'm happy to come back. If there are other questions that arise. So.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, good evening. I'm Dan Kiefer with Whitmer Jones Kiefer, and I think we can treat this as an open forum, so if there's questions, feel free to interrupt. I wanted to go through just some more specifics from the last meeting as far as where we're at and how we're using the comprehensive plan to look at the village place type and rezoning. And so just some of this is more of a formality, but I wanted to make sure we covered some of the technical aspects, and then we can flip through some more of the detail. So the comprehensive plan outlines the locations to utilize the place type overlay zone and states PTO zone is intended to create and reinforce walkable urban environments with a mix of housing, civic, retail, and service choices. So that's the first thing is that we have for us to use as a guide is the comprehensive plan. And in the comprehensive plan, it identifies the place type overlays along, in this case, along 170. And then really the third component is the village place type. So we sort of have three sets of roles that we're looking at. as we sort of have on the bottom of the slide, that we have the comprehensive plan, which was approved by council. That's sort of the guiding document that we're all looking at. And then within that, there's the place type overlay. And there are dots that we'll look at in a second that are on 170 that identify critical locations or land locations where we could apply the place type overlay. And then there's the village place type. That's the type of overlay. And from a regulating standpoint, the comprehensive plan, that was, in our minds, approved by council as a fluid document that will change, obviously, over time. The place type overlay would be essentially our new zoning that we would create for the property. And then as far as the village place type, we start looking at that detail as far as looking at block lengths and building types and stormwater. That's more of a staff level review of the documents once we have the place type in place. We sort of wanted, as Kevin explained, we have multiple steps to go through, and this is sort of the first point. We got the comprehensive plan in place, and now we're going to move forward with looking at the rules established by the comprehensive plan. So I was mentioning those red, or the circles. The yellow are the village place types. So this map is directly out of the comprehensive plan. The yellow are the village place types. The green are the hamlet place types, sort of a less dense type village. And then part of the comprehensive plan, again, this is probably more detail than we need to get into, but there is a vision in the comprehensive plan as far as what happens within the village place types. And this was in the original narrative that we submitted prior to the last planning commission meeting. So I'm not going to read through all of those, but that just so everybody knows we were following that, the vision from the comprehensive plan. And then there are a set of standards and guidelines, again, from the comprehensive plan. Here, we think this is really important because to achieve these, not only the vision, but the detailed standards and guidelines, there needs to be a plan, and really we have an opportunity with the village place type to implement some of these, the vision, and implement the guidelines. So obviously access management standards, that's traffic, multi-purpose trail on both sides of 170. That's something that'll be part of the plan. Street trees, speed limit, that was, I'm not sure why 35 is on there, but that's something that we can look at. Landscape medians, signalized intersections with crosswalks. Again, this is the long-term plan as we look at the corridor of 170. Coordinated development standards. So this wouldn't only apply to us. This would be as other communities or even existing places come in and be redeveloped. These would be standards that would be implemented with new communities. Coordinated streetscape standards and coordinated signage. Signage seems like a small detail, but that's something we think is very important as we look over the next 10, 15 years. So again, I guess the main thing to point out here is the guidelines are established, and the place type overlay, the village place type, is a method for us to work with the county and apply the vision and the guidelines and the goals of the comprehensive plan. As we drill down into more detail, we have the regulating plan, which essentially is becomes our zoning map. So the regulating plan will show the road corridors and the street sections, what they're going to look like in detail. And it will essentially be the zoning map that will outline, as we were describing on 170, more dense development. As you progress back, the community gets much more lower density. The next couple slides were slides that we included in our narrative as place type overlay standards that were part of the comprehensive plan.
Could you back up the one
Yeah.
slide? Hang on.
One more?
No, this one right here. It says the village place type extends beyond the 71-acre property that we're looking at and may include vacant property to the north. What does that mean?
It means so the intent of the comprehensive plan was not to look at boundaries of a property, whether it's a 50 acre or a 100 acre property.
I see.
The goal was to look at the bigger picture. So as we plan Cherry Point neighborhood, the 70 acres, the goal would be to look at, if we could pull everybody else in, we would. But, and Mark can probably explain better, that the vision for the comprehensive plan was those bubbles, not just to include the 70 acres, but to include
So this opens up development for the vacant property,
it opens up the opportunity,
the
yes.
opportunity to develop that beyond what you're doing with your project.
Or it opens up the opportunity to define those lines of what can and can't happen on those properties.
Yeah, I think some of your early drawings in the regulating plan show an access to that vacant property on along Cherry Point Road.
Yes,
So there's some acreage right there on Cherry Point Road to the other side of the development.
Yeah.
Between you and Mayland Point and so on. So that's what he's,
yeah, it certainly
What
opens up the
referring to.
dialogue for planned access. We don't know if that'll be, what type of development, but it opens up that coordination, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
there are no current plans by you to do that or to approach
Not at this
that.
point, no.
Sorry, I did have another quick question on this slide. I think it's suggesting that on the Cherry Point development that you were going to be utilizing 3 transit zones, but on the regulating plan, I only see 2. So I was just wanting to make sure that we were on the same page with that.
We're currently showing 2 of the T4, the T4 Neighborhood Center, or, excuse me, we're showing 1 of the T4s. We are allowed to have both of those in there. So I would say as the plan evolves, we may have both of those. The T4 Neighborhood Center and the T4 Hamlet Center are very similar. And right now we have to overlay those in the same area. The T3 is distinctly different. But that's, I guess we're open. It'll probably evolve into some T4 Hamlet Center. We just didn't really know where to draw the line. But the place type overlay allows us to have one or the other or both.
That hasn't been negotiated yet?
No, we haven't gotten that detailed yet.
Okay,
I can
so-
explain that a little bit better once we get to that.
So the
slide.
regulating plan hasn't been finalized or agreed to yet?
No, the regulating plan is like what they said, we are just at the beginning stage. Staff has worked with the applicant to get it to a point of kind of creating the sheets and creating the metrics for the general layout, so you all can see what it is, because we know it's the first time you've seen it. So we've worked to try to get it to that point so you can understand it as a tool for you all to be involved in land use, land planning, and land design as a part of development of property. What Dan's referring to is under the village place type overlay, it has a makeup of different transects that can be allocated. But it's kind of like an applicant choice, but we as a county can also, if we choose to through this process, provide our input into the makeup of it in a general form. But as of right now, what's in front of you, it is being brought forth, from what Dan was saying, is utilizing 2 of them, which both of them are within their percent framework makeup that the village place type does allow for.
And I can sort of point out where the Hamlet Center could fall in it would fall in the middle, basically, of the 2. Any other questions for next slide? Well, so the next couple of slides were, from the comprehensive plan and the county code. There are certain questions that we need to answer, and what's in red is directly from the county development code, and what's in black are our answers to those. And this was included in the narrative that we submitted the month prior. And I think I'm not gonna read through all these, but if we need to come back to any of the specifics, if anybody's not familiar with these, we can come back to these. Or if there's any questions that get asked, I may come back to these to sort of answer some of the questions.
Okay.
But in a traditional rezoning, these questions become very important, because these are talking about the context of the neighborhood, how it relates to the comprehensive plan and some of those roles that were established. The second one talks about the transition of transect zones. That's where we where the T4 HC may come into play. But again, I'm gonna skip through these and we can come back as if we need more detail. These were all in that original packet, so just making sure everybody received that and is familiar with these, because I don't mind going through them all. Okay, so the regulating plan, this is exactly what was presented last month, except one exception was I don't have a pointer, but basically from the light purple back, the lightest color along Cherry Point Road, which is basically to the north, and then the property to the east, and the property to the south, that's all 50-foot buffer. And then honestly, as you go from Cherry Point Road or from to the west along Cherry Point Road, that's 50 foot there as well. It's just there's additional road widening and there's a trail corridor there, so there will be 50 foot there as well as far as green space. We just haven't really programmed that yet until we get into final engineering. Otherwise, the regulating plan is showing the access points off 170, that's the dark black lines, and then access points off of Cherry Point Road. And then the colors, the darkest color, purple, that's the T4. The lighter color is T3. And I guess the easiest way to describe the lighter color is that's all single family residential. And the minimum, I believe the minimum for T3 is 60 foot wide on those lots. That's what we had it at.
I think they're 11,500, 60 foot, somewhere around there on the minimum.
Can you go back to that for a second?
Yep.
You mentioned the 84 single-family homes at the back, toward the closest to the existing property owners. That to be in the light space and we have the 50-foot buffer.
Yes.
Does that 48 homes, are you still targeting the 419 in totality of housing units? Or have they been reduced? Has the density been reduced because of this placement in total?
We haven't allocated all the density yet, but we know what we can do in the T3. As far as to the west, we haven't outlined exactly how. I can show you, if you don't mind, I'm going to flip to the next slide. It may help. So the red line down the middle, everything to the east of that, the lightest yellow, those are the single family lots. Those have the 50-foot buffer, or those have more buffer around it on the southern area. To the west of that, that's where it would transition to maybe some more single family, also townhomes or duplexes. And then on 170 would be multifamily in the commercial areas. Yeah, so this, where you see 7, that would be a street coming in. It'd be a street with sidewalks on both sides of the street trees, and front porches. And you can see maybe you can't see it, but the RLs on the backs of them, those are lanes or alleys. So garages and all the back of house things that are on the backs of the homes. I'll keep going unless there's any questions.
Just had
Okay.
one, so I'm clear. What were you saying again is the buffer that you're anticipating along Cherry Point, specific in the T4 section?
It's, let me get
I
back
mean,
to
I think
it.
it's showing a 10-foot future right-of-way and a 25-foot buffer. I just wanted to see if that was
Yeah,
correct.
there was an enlargement on, if you zoom out of this sheet. If you go up to the top right-hand corner. Yeah, so what that's looking at, or what that's showing there is the 10-foot right-of-way area, then the 25-foot buffer setback. The circles on that the green where the 25-foot is, those are existing trees. And then where the first line is, that would be where the lot or building is. So that's where we have a little bit of flexibility there as far as how wide that green space is. And there'll be a trail through that corridor as well.
So the 50-foot buffer starts east of, I guess, the Whispering Oaks Drive?
Yes, yes,
Intersection?
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, the 50-foot on the plan starts with the T3. This section is showing the section to the west.
And I want to point out too that, staff's worked with the applicant, as you can see on some of those things with discussions on Cherry Point Road and trying to program future right-of-ways. And some of the things you can see is we said, no, let's identify what we might need as a future right-of-way on this side, and then we'll measure the buffer from there. And in addition to doing that, we've also looked at kind of, there's some good trees along there, and so when that road is being done and how it's being done, there's a lot of moving parts there, but Cherry Point Road needs to be improved regardless. So we're just trying to figure out this point in time the best way to show that and tell that story.
Now, are these improvements going to be shared improvements between the developers and the county? I mean, is the county taking responsibility for some of these, and are these agreements been
Yeah,
reached?
so currently it's being designed right now by Kimley Horn, which is the same traffic engineering firm that's working for the developer. So the county has Kimley Horn on board to do the design work for Cherry Point improvements. We were trying to get out ahead of all this development, so between this development and then the one to the north, this allows us to come in and rather than piecemeal the improvements, understand the totality of those improvements, and then direct whatever portion of those offsite improvements to each development as they come available. So we will work through that ultimate design and figure out to fit all those roadway improvements as well as a multi-use path, and then as far as the buffer yards, to make sure that all fits within that area.
And one of the advantages we have, which is in Cherry Point Road, is that obviously it kind of terminates. We know what's feeding. And so we're able to look at this, and this is kind of part of the land use planning part of this, is we have the road, it kind of is in a vacuum. We know it's approved to the north, this is coming in, and what Eric's saying is that we're taking those two things, they're plugging those numbers in, and they're seeing what Cherry Point Road is gonna need for its future. And that's what we're trying to look at and program and make those improvements.
All right, I'll keep going, then we can come back to any questions. So just to highlight some of the open spaces, well, looking at the master plan, sort of directly running east-west, there'll be a central open space corridor, and that's primarily where all the existing live oaks are today. There'll be a village green that starts that, and then it'll extend down, and that corridor will be more of a passive park, and then it'll be accented by activated pocket parks and other recreation areas. And this slide shows that sort of that transition from passive park on the edges, and then as we get closer to the village, as you see on the right-hand side, more active green spaces. That's the vision for those green spaces. As we move forward, we can identify each of the green spaces and say, here's the size of it. It's 100 by 300. It's going to look like this image. For now, we sort of just wanted to show sort of the vision and the goal for where we're headed. From a streetscape standpoint, it'll be the same thing. The image on the top right-hand corner, there'll be street trees, sidewalks. In the middle of the page, there may be, if there's some commercial at the front of the neighborhood, it would be designed per the T4 zoning, which requires porches, low-key signage, a walkable neighborhood. So this is some inspiration imagery for what that would look like, and not what we want. It's what we want to look like, and it's what the county requires as far as the transect zoning. From an architectural standpoint, These are some images, again, these are images that relate to the T4 zoning. These images are more of the commercial multifamily areas. And then you can sort of see a transition of along 170, on the top left-hand corner would be 2-story buildings, 3-story buildings. As you transition back to the residential, it's more of a cottage type single-family lot. And the T3, these images are representing the size and scale of the T3 homes. Again, these are just to give you guys some background on what the T4 and T3. So this is essentially T3. That's really all we can do as far as what the code allows. The T4 would be what you see on the bottom left-hand corner and the top of these images. So traffic is next, but I can answer any questions or go back to any of the slides we need to. This is much more exciting than traffic.
Cecily?
Just a point of clarification, I was gonna ask you before, but
Okay.
it's fine. In our packet, village place type is defined, has 110 acres minimum, 500 acres max. So how does 71 acres fit into that?
In working with staff, the village place type circle on the map, in the comprehensive map, identifies these areas that allow the village place type to happen. That was the staff's,
Right,
that was,
they use the word expresses.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it allows the potentiality,
yes.
but, do you have any kind of agreement with the vacant, property owner of the vacant land, which I assume will or will not be impacted by the fact that, village place type doesn't meet 110 acres minimum?
They wouldn't be part of this agreement, like formally. The comprehensive plan outlines these zones where the village place type could occur,
Right?
and that's where the 100 acres comes from, because you wouldn't want a smaller area for that. If you-
That's exactly my question.
Yeah.
So, with only 71 acres, to make it work for you all, it's gonna have to have that kind of high intense density. T3 and 4 that you just showed us. I guess I'm wondering why 71, why you are granted the village place type overlay if it says in the code that it's 110 acres minimum.
Because that area, which arguably would be all quadrants of that Cherry Point intersection, qualify the 110 acres as a development
It
zone.
qualifies it even if you don't own it. It
Correct.
qualifies.
Correct. Am I saying that right, Mark?
Well, I mean, there's two things. So the community development code, or just codes in general outside of Beaufort County, when they're looking at this type of land use and pattern development, does kind of get around to some of these general acreages, because they've, through the science of this, they've looked at, you need the general massing of that size, so you can kind of get what you're saying, that mixed use, separation from uses, get some of that commercial component. But if you go back to I guess what Dan's kind of referring to is that if you look at the area as a whole of Malin Bluff, River Oaks, the school, that was the village. So it's being looked at as a village there. That is the village place. Like, this is just that last piece to the south. And in that little piece in front of the school, if that was to continue to develop, we wouldn't want an acreage requirement, just a number in there to prevent us from then applying this same requirement to that parcel. We wouldn't want some artificial number to say, oh, we can't, you're not doing a place type because you don't have acreage. They're a piece of the whole thing. We would want to apply it to them just the same. Now, if people get hung up on that, staff would be more than happy to, like we said at the last meeting, part of the comp plan says to look at the PTO and the community development code and use this, you all are seeing it, and make any changes to it. And if some of the language or the acreage, or we need to add some sort of asterisk to it, we can do that. But we don't want that to get in the way of what we would view as good land use planning and the tool that we have here.
I want to go back to the question on density.
Okay?
The 84 homes and the furthest reach of the property closest to the existing neighborhood back there, as an indication would be 84 homes, single-family homes. My question is, on your previous documents, you were going for 400, plus or minus 419 units. And you also had indicated acreage that you would use for commercial.
Mhm.
Is it still your plan to go to those existing densities?
That's still the current plan, yes.
Okay.
Getting back to the 71 acre question, essentially you're asking for a variance to what the definition is. If you're gonna, it's supposed to be a minimum of 110 acres, and now you only have 71 acres. I see that as a variance to the Village Place overlay.
Yeah, we wouldn't want to send it to the zoning board of appeals. We would want to amend the code. We would amend the code to loosen, if you all perceive that as a situation and you look at it as a parcel thing, we will struggle to get place type overlays. Again, we view this as it's the village of the whole. You have to include Malin Bluff, River Oaks, the school, this parcel. I would even say our acquisition of the park, that county park, it could be a part of it, not as a village. That is the village. So if you all are gonna get hung up on acreage, we can take care of that in another way, but part of these other conversations, the determination by the planning director was made that the intent of this area and the long-range planning goals of this area was to develop as a village. This is a piece of that village. Prior to the new community development code, we called them planned developments. In 2014, when this new community development code came online, it did away with planned developments and it replaced it with the place type overlay. So we're using a place type overlay the way we would have previously the planned development, which is what all these zonings are to the north.
Okay.
But again, staff would be more than happy, again, and we're exploring the place type overlay with you, and we would be more than happy as we go through this to look at it and make amendments to it, tighten it up, add notes, anything that we think is necessary to make it better. That's what staff always is trying to make the community development code better. And when things come along and test them, that's when we get the best opportunity to do it.
Okay.
Just the last thing, and this is just simple math on my part, because obviously, like you said, I think that does, Mark, that does need to be tightened up, because if we look at 71 acres, that's approximately 426 homes that they could put in that village. The way it's currently written at 110 acres, they could put 660 homes in there unless there's some type of annotation. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, density is oftentimes done by acreage.
Right.
So, and that's throughout, we have that kind of stuff. That's just how it's done throughout the entire county in a lot of cases, where you take your gross acreage, you subtract out certain things like wetlands, you kind of come up with your net acreage, and you multiply it by your density factor.
Okay.
That would be the case for a lot of zoning districts, but yes, that type of density, if it was 100 or 110 acres, would get the same benefit of the application of the whatever the community development code said was the appropriate density for that.
So, yeah, that kind of goes along with what I'm asking. If we are going to do this limited to 71 acres, then would we still want to keep 6 dwelling units per acre maximum, or would we be able to asterisk that somehow to lower that number per acre, as to not have a developer come in there and say, well, we're just not getting enough profit out of 400. I'm saying broad-based type of thing. We're going to be able to up it because it's already been approved that we could put that many pieces of property per acre. Am I clear on that, or am I
understand.
making
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah.
Except I think, the way this thing is written, it says that the T4 is really where you can have those higher densities
Yes.
with multifamily, and you're limited to a maximum of 50% within that 110 acres.
Right.
So we may be getting the bulk of that higher density within this section that's more the town center, but as you move out within, excuse me, the 110, that density is gonna go down because you won't have the T4 in those outer reaches, it's more in the center.
Yeah, and.
So you
and-
can't really apply that 6 universally, if that makes
Right,
sense.
yeah, and it's a good question, this is a great part of the conversation, that's kind of way these things are formulated, it's set up to kind of, yes, you have that total density, but by the time you're done doing these mix of these transects, you do kind of create that kind of more village, higher dense node where you might have in the front of it, maybe go back to
I
the
got you.
sketch. You might have multifamily that's coming in at 15 units to the acre. But if I'm doing that, that means I'm burning density from the other areas. But in totality, that's what they get. And so that's kind of how they structure it. And again, that's normal in these types of things. It's not just this code. And that's kind of how you want it. You want your higher density rooftops to be a little bit more near your retail, more walkable, kind of like your little small town area. And then as you get towards the rear, towards the back, where you get more into that existing settlement pattern of the residential use, you want it to calm down. You don't want the higher density stuff. You want it to come in a lot less dense. You're like your traditional 2 units to the acre type of thing.
I got you. Thanks.
And the 6 DUs per acre, that came from the code, from place type overlay. So we're bound by the 71 minus the grading the base site area times 6, so that's where that.
And that stuff would be locked in the regulating
That's-
plan. That stuff gets locked in development agreements. If we wanted to get more in the weeds and start programming stuff, that's the right of the planning commission. But it's a good tool, and it's just a matter of how we apply it and what type of stuff we want for our sureties.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Hey everybody, Dylan Turner. I'm with Kimley Horn, and I'm the traffic engineer for this project. Started working on this one in 2021 and got our approvals from SCDOT in Beaufort County in 2022 as far as the mitigation and stuff that I'm going to go over with you. When we did this traffic study, the 170 corridor study was not adopted by SCDOT yet. And Eric, correct me, I don't think it still has been fully adopted, working through an update right now. Okay, so it still hasn't been fully adopted. So in the actual main content of the traffic study, because we have to encroach on to DOT at Riverwalk, we have to have what's actually out on the road for us to do the traffic study and get approvals, because they won't allow us to use the hypothetical 170 plan. I'm saying hypothetical because it wasn't adopted, it hasn't been. So we did include in the actual TIA at the very end of it, at page like 315 out of our document there, a supplemental analysis to show how this development would work with the 170 corridor plan in place. So I'm going to go over that a little bit with y'all, and I'm sure there'll be questions, so please stop. I'll be glad to answer the questions as I go along. So first diagram you have in front of you here, and do you have it in front of your desktop, or you just have it up on that?
We've got it
Okay.
here.
So this is what 170 looks today, and I mean, to help the orientation, so we have tide watch, so really towards the southern end. It's just how our corridor was and our page layout, that it's east-west here instead of north-south. And then you can see, so tide watch there, and then, Cherry Point's kind of our hot topic of today. So we got Riverwalk too, where we're hoping to make a tie-in point. So I am going to go to the next slide real quick, if we could zoom out a little bit. And so what you have here is the proposed mitigation that goes along with this site is shown in red. The green are other traffic studies done in the area that also have mitigation. I will say to this point that at Cherry Point Road itself, if that green arrow on Cherry Point Road, the north, it's a left turn. If that is not in place by the time that we go into development, that also becomes part of this development's mitigation per our requirements from SCDOT. Because everything has to be in place for us to get our occupancy and stuff for this site. So to run it down, At Riverwalk, we have a traffic signal in a northbound right turn lane. We would utilize the existing U-turn lane as a left turn lane into the site. There, and leaving site access 1, we'd have separate left through and right lane. If we go into site access 2, which is a right in, right out only access, we would have a right turn decel lane shown in red there, and then the red turn lane out. As we get to Cherry Point Road, we have an additional left turn lane. So it's a southbound left, here kind of shown as westbound, but really southbound left. So if you're coming from Beaufort towards Bluffton, let's say on 170, it's that southbound movement. And then to allow for that southbound left turn movement, we actually have to widen Cherry Point Road to accept that additional turn lane. So right now, Cherry Point's a 2-lane road. To make that improvement work, it'd have to go and be widened to a 3-lane road. And we had initially dropped it off at site access number 2, or Street D, shown here. But after coordination with Beaufort County, they asked us to carry it to Oakady Elementary School because of some morning queuing issues and afternoon pickup issues that are currently on Cherry Point Road. So what this allows for, that distance, let's say that's 1,000 feet, that actually allows for about 40 cars, if we assume 25 feet per car, to stack up into that lane as the pickup and drop off time period for the school. And then moving into, so that's the left turn lane into the school, that's our, what we call a drop lane. So we would take that and in, because right now, Cherry Point Road, when you go out there in the morning, there are cars parked off to the side, kind of in the way. I'm sure the residents can speak to that. It's what we observe when out to the field. And the reason you have this in front of you instead of just the 170 quarter plan is because of what I mentioned earlier, is it hasn't been fully adopted. So to get DOT approvals, we had to show what would be required if the 170 quarter plan and access management study never gets implemented. Any questions on this figure before I move to the next? All right.
So just to be clear, you're saying you would have a 3-lane road section back to Oakady Elementary School Road?
That's correct.
Okay.
And you said it's not a fully approved plan yet. What would happen if the fully approved plan is in conflict with what you're proposing?
So that's the good news. When I get to the next one is we don't have conflicts with that fully approved plan.
Current, right now.
Like I'm saying with our development on top, I'm not sure if I understand the question fully. So let's try it again.
Well, this is what you're proposing to do.
Yes,
What if that is in conflict with the overall
corridor plan.
corridor?
And it's not. So I'll get to that on the next slide. So actually the signal that we're showing at Riverwalk Boulevard is a part of the 170 corridor plan. So if we go in before the 170 corridor plan is adopted, it's got to go through adoption by SCDOT, funding and construction. So this site would likely go in before all of that actually occurs in the timelines. So what would happen if we got our signal in at Riverwalk Boulevard there? We have the signal infrastructure. That's a future plan signal. So then the county is actually able to use the infrastructure and signal infrastructure from that to use for their plan. Also, we are having some widening on Street A to add the right turn lane. That is widening that the county can also use for their future plan. The right turn lane would have to be put back in. That'd be a DOT requirement. But as us widening 170 as part of this, it does tie into the overall 170 plan. So there are no direct conflicts with what we're proposing to what the 170 corridor plan has. Yep.
I know this came up at the first meeting.
I apologize, I was not there. I was
That's
on
all right.
vacation.
The
But
traffic study, if I recall, said that the signal at Riverwalk was dependent on meeting warrants.
it is.
And if it couldn't, there was a question of potentially having to move Riverwalk or some other solution, and I guess that was. where we
Okay,
had
so
some
what
concerns.
that states, so the way that this works and with the way we have this agreement with SCDOT is that right now, the intersections of Riverwalk and Cherry Point don't meet the DOT spacing requirements. And so if we do meet the signal warrants to install the signal, DOT wants us to try to curve Riverwalk some. So there's some stuff we'd want to do to Riverwalk. There's a pretty substantial wetland close by, so we don't get to move it very much. But the goal there would be to do a little bit of relocation of Riverwalk, tie into our site access for that traffic signal.
So you'd move it down toward the swamp land?
So we would move it, but obviously still have to keep in all the wetland buffers and everything. We wouldn't be able to encroach into that wetland down there.
Is there any alternative to that, like creating a spine road down the middle of the Cherry Point development? Instead
Creating a
of-
spine road, I'm not
Well,
sure.
something down the middle of the property that would be.
We wouldn't be able
even
to
the-
signalize it and keep it full movement.
Excuse
If we wouldn't be able to signalize it and keep it full movement, because then if we went through the middle of the development, it would then be way too close to Cherry Point at that point. So this is our southernmost part of the property. And so we want to tie in as far south as we could.
Do you have any idea, or your thoughts, being professional at this timeframe is going to be required to get the authorizations from SCDOT? And is development going to proceed in advance of getting these requirements approved? And
Right now, I would say probably, but I don't know. I'll go lean on Eric to see if you have kind of a timeline for the 170 corridor.
Yeah, for the overall corridor, and we talked about this one the last time,
The
to
overall.
be able to get that, to do the overall plan. Now, we have a contractor actually on board right now to do some spot improvements along this corridor. Nothing in this particular area, but those bigger improvements are going to take something, we're going to have to get some kind of grant funding or sales tax or something like that approved to look at that bigger plan. As far as the design goes on that, we're actively working on, with SCDOT, on what that design looks like for the corridor. So planning for that, but I don't have a good timeline at this point because it's so dependent on funding.
And that's in the longer-term plan?
That's in the longer-term
And does it
plan.
involve Jasper County as well? It's
Yes, sir.
Beaufort County?
Correct. Yeah, that is it will be a plan that will be between SCDOT, Beaufort County, Jasper County, and Hardyville as well.
Hardyville.
Because all those jurisdictions are front 170, the 170 corridor.
And can I get some just clarification a little bit? Because earlier, Mr. Dukes had said that the SC 170 impact would take place, and if I'm misquoting you, Mr. Dukes, I'm sorry, but I was writing as fast as I could, just without cost to taxpayers. So with what you said, though, we would have to get grants or funding, perhaps?
Well, so the improvements, there's the bigger 170 corridor
Right.
that will look at potentially 6 lanes on 170.
Mm-hmm.
That's a little ways down the road. As far as what they're planning for this development, they're accounting for all the off-site improvements that are necessary for this development to function, which includes, as Dylan was stating, an additional southbound left turn lane onto Cherry Point, as well as some improvements at Riverwalk. So again, they're accounting for those improvements with their development itself.
Okay.
So maybe to clarify that, where you're showing new right turn movements from 170 into Street A and Street B, those would be part of the developer's.
Yes,
construction.
what is in red here is what the developer would have to do for permitting, to get encroachment permits from SCDOT. And then from the approvals of Beaufort County as well, those are what this development would be responsible for. And that's in the red. The only exception is the green, what we're gonna call northbound, but it's not. Cherry Point's not a northbound road, but on this screen it is. So it's that green arrow. If that's not put into place by Oakity Village or Malin Bluff, then to get our permit from DOT, that also would have to be constructed.
I think from my perspective, I'm having trouble figuring out the timeline of this whole thing. It just seems like it's all murky.
Well, I would say from the development timeline, I mean, our planned opening year, how far away is? Yeah, so 2 years from now, so hopefully around 2026, correct? I would think that the 170 corridor study's likely further than 2 years away from being fully open and operational. And because of that, we would likely be doing these improvements. And then
Prior
whatever.
to that,
Prior to the 170 corridor improvements, because we have to have stuff in place before we can get
okay.
any occupancy from DOT. DOT can hold the occupancy up if our turn lane improvements aren't in place.
The other question I have is, I think in our last meeting, we had a letter from the school district saying that they're pretty full, 91% if I remember correctly. You said you were going to make improvements in there to keep the traffic from backing up on the 170. So we're going to put more homes in, more school-age children. The school's going to be overrun. The school's going to have to increase, assuming the referendum gets passed in November. And future development, future expansion, are your improvements are they taking into account what might happen 10 years from now?
So
15 years from now?
yeah, so not to that extent, not to 10 to 15. We have our study out to, let me just tell you really quick, I think it was 2026 in this one. So our study goes to 2026, but we do apply a background growth rate to our numbers to say, like, we know these numbers aren't stagnant. So we apply growth to what we call no build, and then we added on approved developments, which in this case was Malin Bluff, Oakity Village, and then across on Pearlstein is a speedway, like a gas station. And so we added all those on top. And so those numbers are accounted for. As far as the school being over, I don't know
Yeah,
those answers.
nobody
I don't
knows,
know
yeah.
about that. But I would say with our development, and as Dan's saying, hopefully making it walkable, this would be kind of an advantage of being able to walk to school, reducing the number of cars off the road.
We have a representative here from the school district that perhaps would like to address some of this. I have a question that kind of pertains to what you just said and for the school district. Am I right? You're a representative for the school district?
Hi, I'm Carol Crutchfield. I'm the Director of Facilities Planning and Construction for the Beaufort County School District. And yes, we did write a letter. I think we wrote that letter back in April. Then you all probably have already seen that. Since that time, the board did approve to go out to voters for a referendum. Included in that referendum would be a new elementary school that would be on the May River campus. And so if the referendum were to pass and we were to build that new school, we would do some rezoning, which would provide a little bit of relief, at least at this point, for Oakity Elementary. However, anything that develops around there obviously brings, like you were just saying, would bring more students. And then there's that other vacant lot there, so that
Yeah,
potentially could
I-
do something.
I assume a certain population of the school now gets bused from elsewhere to Oakity Elementary.
Yes.
Would the students age students in the Cherry Point, River Oaks, Malin Bluff complex community be given a first top priority to use the local school over busing?
Correct.
I would hate to see them get bussed out.
I can't speak for, we haven't rezoned yet. That's a process we would go through after we would
Yeah.
start building a new school and that kind of thing. But typically in the past, when we do rezone, a perimeter of a mile, 1 mile radius gets automatic. You're going to go to that school. And then we start looking at different areas. Anything probably north of Oakity up into the Broad River Bridge most likely would also go to Oakity. We've had lots of discussions in many years in the past, if you've lived here for very long, about sending students, across the Broad River Bridge, and that's pretty much been a hard line for the board not to want to do that. So then we would be looking at areas south of Oakity and how those could be, moved to other schools, so.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Other questions?
That answer that question.
Good, it did.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right.
Can I add real quick to that? Because I think that's an important part of conversation, is right now, the part of the conversation is the bus traffic and the school trips that are coming here and coming onto Cherry Point Road. And when you use village-type planning like this, and you locate with elementary schools, juniors and high schools may be a little different, but with elementary schools, when you locate, I guess, that miles, that range, and I think even school districts don't even offer bus service within a certain day. I mean,
There's a safe pathway for students to walk, and that is key.
yeah. So there's a component there of resources too. Buses. I mean, I'm not trying to like doing it. Buses, it costs money. It costs school districts money. Bus drivers, there's a shortage. All of these things add up. So when you have these schools, that investment that was made by the county to go and kind of be placed in this village, when planners look to complete that. And as a part of this, that's part of what we're talking about here. Now, if we have issues with the general plan or densities or where that's a part of the conversation. But to provide an opportunity for kids or for development or residential development to be closer to an elementary school, which is a significant investment that was already been made, that's a part of what the planning department is trying to bring to the table and as a part of this conversation. And when doing that, again, if you need new schools though, I mean, that's part of it. If you don't have new schools, this is what I'm saying doesn't even matter. But once you start doing that, you have less bus trips now coming to the school. You have less parents clogging up Cherry Point Road, dropping their kids off because they're walking. Those parents are going to other schools. So that's a part of all of that. But I do believe, to the point, the success of the referendum is key in achieving that scenario.
All right. Any questions on kind of this side? I'll go into the 170 corridor plan next to show kind of the overlap that was asked about this development with the 170 plan. All right. So next slide shows the blue is what Beaufort County is proposing along the 170 corridor. So RCI or Super Street, I like to call it Super Street. So if you hear that, it basically it's widening and access management along 170. So not a lot of left turns are allowed out of side streets. And so then they actually go in U-turns. So those kind of curved arrows you see along 170 are U-turn bulbs that are planned. So we still would have to have, for DOT, because of the volume of right turns that we have, that if 170 is widened, we still have to have our right turn lanes into our development. And then, like I mentioned before, Riverwalk and that traffic signal. So that's part of the plan in the 170 corridor plan. That infrastructure could be put in by our developer if signals are warranted. And the reason we say that is DOT doesn't allow the signals to go in unless they're warranted. And then we still have, because of what we would do, and let's call it the short term or the pre-170 corridor plan, we still have the widening to the school. That would be a part of this development, and the dual left lane on 170 into this development.
So this is the 6-lane superhighway that goes all the way up to where, Snake Road or?
Right
Moves
now, I
up to
think it
462?
goes to 460. Or does it go to Argent?
No, in the original study, it goes to 462. So the original study, the southern limit is Oakadee Center South, just south of the interchange, and the northern limit is 462.
Any questions on this right now?
Well, just a question of timing and how long it's going to take and the funding. This is.
Yeah.
This is right now.
And that's
more of a
what kind
dream.
of, what maybe advantage of this to go through is that the development is tying in right with those improvements. And so the if of 170 ties into I think just based off of experience, the construction of this will probably be done before the 170 corridor improvements because the finalization of design plans, which the county is currently undergoing, plus funding and then construction, I think minimum of 5 years. And then we're looking at 2 years from now. And so we'll have some stuff in place before the 170 corridor goes into play, and our improvements they coincide with the 170 corridor study.
I heard them first talking about this super lane back in 2006, 2007, when Mylan Point and the rest of River Oaks and another thing was being talked about. A lot of years ago.
That's why I don't know the when of that project.
Yeah.
But we are tying into the when it happens.
Does this also take into account the development that's going on in the Hardyville side, in Hardyville and Jasper County? Because
So
they got a
that's
lot of
what we
plans going
have
on.
our background growth rate for. So whenever we do these traffic studies, we reach out to Beaufort County and SCDOT and say, hey, do you know developments close by that you want us to consider? And so that's when they gave us Malin Bluff, Oakity Village, and Speedway for us to consider in that proximity. And then anything outside of that proximity is our growth rate so that we acknowledge that, hey, we know traffic's not going to be stagnant in this area. It is going to grow. And so that is taken into account through a growth rate, but not the specific development trips. It's the background growth rate that would capture that.
Can I jump in real quick too? I just want to understand, this is that super street model
Mhm.
that is being currently looked at. This was being looked at prior to this application, has nothing
Yeah.
to do with this rezoning. I just want everybody to understand that.
How developed have the talks been with Hardyville and Jasper County?
I don't know if we've had conversations. I'm not sure.
It was unclear at the last meeting how advanced those talks, or even if they existed.
From a traffic perspective,
Yeah.
there has not been conversations with Jasper County or Hardyville. They don't have permitting rights here, so like they wouldn't have an approval of this for what we would do for the traffic study.
Right.
Nothing's been communicated directly to.
But they certainly have a dog in the fight with volume of traffic.
So they do, but as far as issuing permits for encroachment, they don't on this one in particular. This would be in Beaufort County and SCDOT. All right, I'm gonna move to one final slide from the traffic. So just kind of showing what traffic flow could look like. So the red line is the existing traffic flow along Cherry Point. So it's just one point through Cherry Point in that signal. If we have our traffic signal at Riverwalk, we've got another connection point, not only for the residents of this development we're talking about today, but existing residents on Cherry Point. Let's say that the school is having one of those days, they actually have a bypass around the school to another access on full movement access onto 170 with this plan. And that's just the purpose of showing the increased in connectivity throughout for this development. Because all the roads in this would be public.
In the directions of the arrows, that doesn't mean one way, it just means.
No, it's
but
just showing both ways there. Yep.
Hold on, let me back up there. What roads will be public?
I think the roads that we have here, that's what I asked, was all public, right?
Open to the public.
Open to the public.
This is Beaufort
Open
County.
to the public.
We don't take roads for maintenance.
Yeah, all right, open to the public. Thank you. Thank you. And that's what I have for traffic, so if you have any other questions, please let me know.
Any other questions? I guess not.
That's the end of our presentation. Okay, yep, and that's all that we got.
All right,
All right, thank you all.
thank you. It's time now for public comments. I've got some folks, I've got 4 people signed up. Do we have any others at this point? 5 people? All right. I'm calling you up to the podium. Please introduce yourself. You have a 3-minute time limit. You'll be on a timer. So I'm going to call on Scotty Daniel first.
Good evening. My name's Scotty Daniel. I have property at 165 Cherry Point Road. First off, about the schools, they're currently overloaded to the point right now that at Cherry Point Elementary, if you have a child at the school, it's a lottery system for after-school care. You enter a lottery, and 2 weeks before the school year starts, they tell you whether your child can be taken care of at the school or not, because it's overcrowded. So that's already an issue. Even if the referendum passes in November, I'd like to know how long would it take for the schools to be built and come up where they can actually take the overflow of children?
Probably 2026.
So that's beyond when they're going to have the development up and running, correct? Okay. And like they pointed out before, these things don't happen in a vacuum. This is just one of many developments that are going to be taking place. So not only is this going to overload with 400, there's going to be another one just down the road, another one just down the road, and another one just down the road. I think Jasper County just came up with a moratorium to stop some of this stuff, take a breather, and relook at this stuff. During their presentation this evening, I think they've actually said they're not really sure what they're going to do, or if they do know what they're going to do, they haven't told it to you, because they could do this, they could do that, it's not been finalized. They're showing you 2 sections, but they could go to 3 sections. So why are we going to approve it without knowing exactly what they're going to do? I still feel like we're putting the cart before the horse. We're going to do this counting on a referendum to pass. If the referendum doesn't pass, we've got serious problems. That's basically it. The school representative covered a lot of my issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Grant McClure?
Hello, my name is Grant McClure. I live here in Beaufort, and I work for the Coastal Conservation League. Our office is at 1212 King Street. On behalf of the Conservation League, thank you for the opportunity to comment tonight. We previously commented on this issue at the last Planning Commission meeting, and at that time we had asked for a deferral due to concerns about traffic infrastructure and environmental impacts. We are respectfully asking the applicant to consider pursuing an additional continuance for this project. We appreciate the applicant has increased the buffers to 50 feet, and also they've added an environmental assessment. However, we still have a lot of concerns about impacts to the Okatee River from increasing the impervious surface in the area. Additionally, we're still very concerned about traffic on Highway 170, the lack of infrastructure in general. The Beaufort County Comprehensive Plan, that SC 170 corridor section that was actually on the screen earlier, it talks specifically about a coordinated study with Jasper County and Hardeeville to define a growth framework for the corridor and address issues of joint concern such as transportation and environmental protection. And it sounds like those conversations have not necessarily happened yet with Hardeeville and with Jasper County. And so maybe there's an opportunity to have those conversations prior to any approvals. The SoLoco Growth Committee, that's a new committee that was recently established. That was kind of a step in the right direction towards realizing this regional planning strategy, this SC 170 corridor plan. And so basically what I'm getting at is that we just need a little bit more time to try to figure out some of these issues with traffic, with the environment, with the schools, et cetera. And so I respectfully would ask that we consider another deferral. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Felice Lamarca?
Thank you. 149 Cherry Point. And I had everything I was going to say to you, but I actually now have more questions than statements, believe it or not. I wish we had had some of that in our agenda package to go over and digest ourselves. Density. They keep saying what they can do, not what they're going to do. How can you permit, move it on to the next level when we don't know what they're going to do? That's a big one for me. The developer, he needs to make money. I understand that. I like to make money. It's T2 are one dwelling per 3 acres. What is wrong with rural in this county? Why are we trying to pave it all? Why are we building more and more and more before the schools? And I'm going to tell you, that referendum will probably be voted down. It's a tax reassessment year. We are tired of paying. We're tired of Beaufort County building without a long-range plan. And I don't like your long-range plan. It's not working. Not in Beaufort County, anywhere in Beaufort County. Find one place where it's working. One place, Hilton Head, Bluffton, Beaufort, Okatee. Where is it working? Tell me. So the cart's been bought before the horse. And that horse is starving. Okay, environment, my last thing. If you weren't offended by the Newkirk assessment, I was. It's okay, they stated, I have to say this, quote, "This tract is no different than thousands of acres of similar habitat spread throughout the Low Country." What does that mean? That it's okay to annihilate our neighborhood and tell the wildlife, go, you're not special. And where are they gonna go? We're paving everything. Where are they gonna go? You permitted, and I don't mean you, I mean Beaufort County, Malin Bluff, River Oaks to dump on Cherry Point. And now you want 5 exits onto Cherry Point. Thank you.
Thank you. Larry Michuda?
Larry Michuda, and I'm 149 Cherry Point as well. You ladies and gentlemen have a very difficult, I don't know how you do it, because we were here at the first meeting and thought we had information, and now all of a sudden, we have a lot more information. And what was done, the basic change, was the 50-foot buffer in this study, which told us nothing more than we don't have any endangered species. Well, we won't, because we're gonna ruin the places that they could go anyway. But besides that, one of the things that came up, 71 acres, and then you talked about the 110 acres. Even the 71 acres isn't 71, because if you look at it, there's a lot of green space or water space in that acreage. They say it's green space, well, they can't build on it anyway. So that condenses that 71 acres and 110 that we're talking about even more. During the traffic study, how are people going to get in and out with the development going on down Cherry Point Road? Never heard anything about that. Looking at the traffic study, no left turn now off of Cherry Point. You have to go turn right and make a U-turn. I don't know how many times you've seen people make U-turns now. I mean, it's a disaster as far as I'm concerned, and I see it both on Cherry Point and Malin Bluff. It's pushed down and you have to go around, and there's no stoplight in between. You kind of have to wait the distance. That's going to be a difficult thing. And then you say, well, I can have access through a planned development. Can you imagine, like right now, the last I saw, we have Malin Bluff dumping into River Oak, and that's one street. Everybody's driving through the development, and this is a neighborhood. I wonder about that, whether that's a good thing or not. I think we're seeing a lot of overdevelopment. You see it both in Jasper County and all over Beaufort. You've got Argent. You look at River Oaks, what's happened in Bluffton. River's End is right up the way. This River Oaks development right here, all that is in development right now. And what's the long-term plan? How do we envision Beaufort County to really look in the future? And I see we're just building open land. As soon as there's open land, the gentleman here said, we're accounting for land that's not even part of the development as, oh, that's okay, that's with your tool, we can go ahead and include that too, because somebody else may build. I'm sorry I exceeded my time.
No, thank you.
Okay, well, anyway, I think you get my point.
Yes.
I think there's an awful lot, there wasn't enough information, and now all of a sudden we're getting more information, which is good. But it sounds like, as Felice said, we need more information to really help decide, or you do, and we can't even make a comment if we don't have that information. And it's more than just comment, we're against building, it's what we're doing long-term for the whole community.
Thank you. Thank you. Derek Stetter? Derek Stetter?
Hello, Derek Stetter, 169 Cherry Point. I had a great plan in place, and then we got some additional information, so it's going to be a little muddy, but that's okay. I feel like we're just trying to force something into an area that isn't big enough to accommodate it. We have a comprehensive plan that's been mentioned numerous times. It's very confusing to me because I haven't had time to digest it, but it doesn't make any logical sense. We know what they want to do, but they're not telling us what it's going to be. If we had a finalized plan that we could all sit there and digest and say, this is exactly what it's going to be, maybe we'd be more open to it. But the way it sits right now, there's just too many questions. I know you guys don't have anything to do with the superstructure of 170 and that, but is the whole school going to turn right out of Cherry Point and do a U-turn? I don't know how whoever came up with that. I don't know how they have a job. Mr. Kiefer had mentioned that the comprehensive plan is fluid. So just because we can do it doesn't mean we should. I feel like we're taking land from someone else to say, we can make it work. And the comprehensive plan is a great plan, and I think in the right application, I think it's excellent. This is not the right application. The density scares the crap out of me. 419 or 400, whatever. If it's 400 plus, that is so many dwelling units in that small of an area. And again, people have mentioned it before that there's green space taken out, and that's just a lot of units in that small of an area. And I have a minute, so I'm good. I'll wrap it up real quick, but Mark had mentioned that this development has a community in mind, which I think is a very interesting statement. The only thing is, everyone who's for the community or for the development is being paid by the developer here. The rest of the community who isn't being paid is the one who has opposed it. So is this in the best interest of the community? I don't think it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathleen Keating?
I am Kathy Keating, and I live at 132 Cherry Point Road, and I'm another person with a prepared statement, but we didn't have all the information. I'm going to ask you guys a question. Doesn't it seem like this whole thing is predicated on ifs? If this happens, and if that happens, and if that happens, then it's all going to be good. Well, it's not, number one. Number two, Derek, you said the right thing. Yeah, it's a great plan somewhere else, somewhere that isn't on that thoroughfare that goes from 462 to 278. Go further south, I mean, honest to God, this is the craziest damn thing ever. If you saw what's going on behind the elementary school, that's not a village. That's a bunch of second-rate hack houses, and we all know it because we're watching it. Nothing's plumbed. Nobody's checking these things. If I sure as hell hope whoever buys these things does some serious due diligence, because they won't. I was going to read this prepared thing so I don't go nuts on you guys, but gee, this is like the most half-assed, stupid thing. You don't even know what the effect of those 300 and whatever behind the elementary school with kids, with cars, and everything else, how that impacts everything, and yet you want to add more. Congratulations. As everybody else said, they don't give a crap. And sometimes I wonder about you guys. Seriously. One of my friends, one of my neighbors said, who the hell are they working for, Beaufort County or the developers? We don't know right now, buddies.
Ma'am, can you please be a little
I'm
more
sorry.
respectful? Thank you.
Anyway, I'm done.
Thank you. Okay, that's the end of public comments. That's all I've got. So, anybody have questions of,
Just real quick, I want to address just a couple of those comments. So
you want
one
to
is.
come on up,
Yeah,
please?
sure.
Just for the record, so everybody in the video can see you.
So to address the coordination between Jasper and Hardyville, we are all the agencies are part of the MPO, which is the Metropolitan Planning
Right.
Organization. So as far as the coordination for traffic and planning, that has taken place. They are all part of the LATS study area, which they all sign off on the corridor study itself. And again, this updated corridor study that we're doing right now will again be signed off on by LATS. We will bring that to you all for review as well. So again, more to come on that, but I just want everyone to understand that coordination between Jasper and Hardyville does happen now as well as all the municipalities throughout the county. So we are working on that. As far as that updated corridor study, we will bring that to you all. So you will all have that review. Again, as far as the R-Cut corridor, know a lot of questions. That's not the purpose of this meeting. So we can bring further detail to you all when we bring that corridor study to you sometime in the next 6 months.
Thank you. Anybody have questions of staff or?
I have a question for Mark. So what we don't have here that we might have had under the old plan unit development system, I don't know where all this drainage is going to go. And I think in one, practically the only remark I saw was that it was going to be handled on site. But I don't, on these maps, I see, wetland buffer, wetland, but I don't know how all of the runoff from all the dwellings, the impervious runoff is going to be handled. And that concerns me for the river.
Okay.
So when do we learn about that?
Well, that's engineering. So we have the stormwater manual. We have a stormwater department. All developments have that stormwater manual applied to them. It involves basically if whatever water runs to an area, you have to treat it or manage it. I know you all know about the stormwater manual. So that would be a requirement of any development. Whether it's this or it develops under its current zoning or any other site, they have to apply the stormwater manual as a part of their site development. This site would have to meet the stormwater manual as a part of its development. Like that's already there. Like there's no negotiating that.
Yeah. Excuse me, Mark. That's all right. As I understand it, the Okatee is already impaired. So it seems to me any runoff, stormwater, sewer, has to be maintained on the site and not dropped into the Okatee. Are there provisions in the stormwater plant management manual for keeping it on site?
I can't speak for the storm. I can't do all that. So you're saying like no drainage would leave the site like it currently does?
Mm-hmm.
That's an engineering question. That would be a very strong feat. That means everything is being managed and handled and infiltrated at the site with no points of, access or runoff. I believe even 170 is draining through the site right now. It's taken water off of 170 as a part of the old design.
Well, that's probably the part of the problem that made Okatee
It could be. I would say that
impaired.
part of that drainage, there could be some of the stuff, what you're saying is there could be some direct drainage from the road that's not really getting treated, just kind of just running through. If this property was, whatever it is that, of course, that drainage would have to be rerouted and managed. I can't speak for it, whether it be in approving the site, but I can tell you that stormwater laws today in South Carolina are far superior than they were even 10 years ago. I mean, far superior. So the area has done great strides in helping achieve a lot of the things that people have said here. But I can't sit here and say that no stormwater would ever leave the site when it currently does.
So the probable condition would be that it wouldn't, and that it would add to the impairment vocity, potentially. Is that a fair statement?
The stormwater manual basically says you have to like, if there's so much, let's say a gallon of water goes to a point, when you're done developing, a gallon of water can go there. You have to hold it back, and you have to release it, and you have to clean it before it can go out. And that's kind of what stormwater manuals, or stormwater engineering does these days. Unfortunately, the state of South Carolina didn't do very well in its adoption of Phase 1 and Phase 2. A lot of other states did well, and I think some of the areas kind of paying the price as a whole. But I can tell you that Beaufort County has been a pretty good leader in, I'm going to say, being a good leader for the state in regards to its new requirements and laws. So hopefully, some of that stuff and people in the state can start to see that there is a better way to do things than that's been done in the past.
Thank you.
Can the developer at least tell us what you think impervious percentage is going to be versus what it is now?
I can talk through the plan for stormwater. We do have a engineer on the team. We're at this rezoning standpoint. We've gotten detailed internally, but not to the point of submitting documents and having them here. Obviously, as we move forward, that we can provide additional detail. I'm gonna go back to the master plan. Okay, so in the master plan, there's an existing stormwater ditch that runs basically through the center of the property, directly outfalls. I think exactly where Kristen's pointing. So we would be picking up that stormwater, and with the new ordinance in particular, we got to treat the stormwater in multiple locations. So as soon as water hits the building or any parking lot surface, and most of these parking lots will be pervious just based on the new requirements. We'll treat the water for sort of the first flush as it enters the site or comes off of the building. That's the first level of treatment. Then there'll be additional treatment as the water drains across pervious surfaces or impervious surfaces in this case. And you see the central green space that runs through. That'll be one treatment method. That area will contain rain gardens and bioswales, treat that water. And as the water, everything sort of flows obviously towards the river, towards the south. The additional treatment areas would be what you see in blue. Those would be either rain gardens or bioswales or some ponds. With the new ordinance, you don't see big ponds. It's not part of what's allowed in the new ordinance. That's why you're not seeing a big 5-acre pond. So we have the land set aside on the southern corridor, which runs, running east-west from 170 on the southern part of the plan. Behind that green amenity, and then really every area as you go towards the east has green space allocated for stormwater. In addition, we're not showing it here, there'll be treatment in all the alleys. There'll be gravel. There may be subsurface retainage in those alleys. So we have 4 or 5 different methods that'll be used to treat stormwater. As far as calculations and volume of water, we're not there yet. But as Mark described it, we have pretty strict guidelines and codes to follow to get there. Does that help clarify or any additional detail?
Yeah, somewhat. It's
Have any
like everything else.
Have any calculations been done about the amount of impervious surface that's going to be created with the widening of 170?
No,
This section of 170?
not that I'm aware of.
No, we're just in concept.
Concept, okay. But then also when 170 gets widened, that'll increase stormwater flow to the existing stormwater ditch that you talked about. So you'll have to account for that in your calculations.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Further questions, comments? Are we ready to make a motion?
Discussion first, or?
Well, we'll have a discussion. We can have a discussion now if you want to talk to
After
each
the
other.
motion.
Sure. Do you want to discuss it now further amongst ourselves before we have a motion? Anybody have any comments
guys
they'd like to make?
Yes, I'm unable to support this development. And as most of you know, I was a developer. This, to boil it down, this residential development is too far ahead of the infrastructure development in this particular area. Schools, roads, we all have questions. I can't in good conscience support this proposal. And I'm further troubled by the fact that it's not, we are not speaking to the developer of this property. We're speaking to someone who is dressing this property up to sell it to someone else. And we're going to go through this all over again. I think we are at least 3, if not 5 years ahead of when we should be considering this development for this area, given the infrastructure, the roads and schools, and all the other things that seem to be questions that we don't have all the answers to. I'm unable to support it. Thank you.
Other comments?
The other comment I have, I really like the idea of the overlay district, village type thing. I think that's really good with the comprehensive plan that pointed out. However, having said that, I'm looking along the same lines as Dan over there. There's just too much that's unknown. The school issue is just a big one for me. If the referendum doesn't pass, then the whole thing falls apart. It's a house of cards, it just falls right down. And I think you're right. I think there are at least 3 to 5 years, maybe less, I don't know, depending on when things happen away. And I don't think I can support this development at this time. It's just too early.
The only comments I have are gonna echo a lot of what we've talked about up here and what a lot of folks in the community have said. Again, just like Glenn had said, it's the success of the referendum. It's a 50-50 chance of whether that's gonna happen. And then again, even if it does pass, you're talking 2026, perhaps, maybe, we don't know, given the current workforce or folks that are gonna be able to construct and build and get things done on time. The continued growth, not in this area, but in Beaufort County alone, ever since the pandemic, has been exponential. Anything, if any of y'all remember 4 years ago, 170 was a 2-lane road. And you look back, look now and you see what it is. And you're just, it's mind-boggling to me. I do, as I said this the last meeting, I appreciate what the staff has done. I think these things, these village place type overlays are excellent. I'm just not sure this is the right place for it, given the growth in this particular area that's already there, given the infrastructure that is still up in the air of whether it's going to be approved or the roads are going to be widened. Nobody knows yet. It's still just too much smoke and mirrors. The highways are already congested as it is. I don't see it getting any better. And during the time when we plan on making these changes, whenever the county and SCDOT decides they're going to come to terms, what impact is that going to have on the current residents in this area and the folks that are still trying to do their day-to-day tasks? I mean, I get it. It's progress, it's development, but some folks have had enough. The community impact alone, I think, is substantial. And I'm not real sure this is the right time and the right place for this. I do have a question. I don't know if this is out of order or not. How long ago was the property purchased by the developer? Do we know that? I'm sorry?
It's still pending.
Okay, I understand. Very good. That answers my question. Thank you. That's all I've got.
All right, thank you.
I got one other comment, and that is, you brought up the idea that you call it an MPO?
Yeah,
I think
Metropolitan Planning
Yeah, the Metropolitan, I'm encouraged by that. that there's talk with Hardyville, Jasper, because they have a stake in this whole 170 thing too. And yet, they're not here tonight. We don't know what they're thinking about. And we're still acting in a vacuum on this one piece of property here. So I think it's great, but we need to know more about what's going on there in order to make intelligent decisions, planning decisions, anyway.
I guess I've got a couple of comments, and I may be the minority voice here, but I'm just trying to think in my own mind what the role of the planning commission is. And for me, it's been, in many ways, as a caretaker or steward of our comprehensive plan, which is something that we just recently adopted, which was an extremely long public process that brought us to where we are today. These place type overlay locations and the type of place types that are being suggested were all part of that public process and are adopted as part of our comprehensive plan. So in my mind, I don't know that this commission's role is really to make a decision on what is essentially placing a moratorium on development, because whether it's this development or as the property is currently zoned, any new growth is going to have impacts. There are certain things that we can control, other things that I think are beyond this body's control. The school district situation is one that I mean, if this was developed as T2, one new house with children in it is going to have an impact. So it's not that there would be no impact unless there was a moratorium on development. I think one of the questions from the first meeting that I had a lot of concerns with was the roadway infrastructure. I felt that a lot of those questions were answered in terms of the exhibit that showed all of the improvements that are going to be required to be made by the developer in order for this to move forward. So there is no question in my mind on the timing of those improvements, that those will happen as part of this development before that development is complete. So I think one of the things that's different with these place type overlays in my mind versus just standard zoning is that with standard zoning, you've got a lot more uncertainty, I believe, in terms of the amount of information that has to be provided. I think if there are some things that we can tie to a recommendation to provide greater certainty, I think that's going to be a benefit to everyone. So for example, they've talked about increasing the buffer, so I think that's something that's a given. They provided information that said they're willing to limit or constrict density for all of the area that's being zoned T3 to 84 dwelling units, which is about 2.3 dwelling units per acre. So we know that back half to 2/3 is going to be single-family development, and that the density is going to be capped at that 2.3 roughly dwelling units per acre, which is immediately adjacent to where the existing residential is. There was a lot of confusion in that first traffic study that talked about 240,000 non-residential square feet. And in a lot of the letters that we received in that first go-around, there was concern about that. Obviously, I certainly had a concern about that much non-residential development, but I think now they're saying that their non-residential development is going to be somewhere between 25 and 75,000 square feet. And if they're willing to lock that in so that we know there's going to be no more than 75 and no less than 25, then I think that provides some certainty. We know that there's going to be some of those non-residential uses that are necessary for this village concept to work, but it's not going to be so big that you're going to end up with too much commercial development and create the issues that we all want to avoid along 170. And then these regulating plans are something that I think is very significant as well, in that it provides general lotting patterns and a insight into the scale and massing of the non-residential development, so that we have some certainty that you're not gonna, there's a pretty long list of land uses that are allowed within the T4, but if they fit within kind of this lotting pattern that they've provided on the regulating plan and general scale and massing, you know you're not gonna have big box retail out there. You're gonna have things that I think are consistent with the type of scale and massing that belongs within a village place. While I had some concerns, a lot of the concerns that I had from the first meeting were answered by the responses that we got tonight. So I would probably be moving more in favor of recommending this type of village place overlay in order to meet what the comprehensive plan is asked for and provide some greater certainty as to what's actually going to be built up there.
It just in response to John, what you said, and this is what I kept thinking of when you were talking pretty much about the square footage and what they want to build in that particular, the front end zone towards 170. You know, the theme that comes up again and again in the comprehensive plan is walkable urbanism. And they want to be able to walk, you know, to do as much as you possibly can. And I think you're very correct. There has to be some type of guarantee that there is going to be those type of business in there that people are going to want to walk to. It doesn't need to be an Old Navy. It doesn't need to be, you know, something big and large, because then you are going to incur that further traffic that's just going to do nothing more than congest that area. I don't know how you guarantee that, because those would be opened up for bidders to come in and put in whatever they want. So there would need to be some more stringent guidelines, I guess, within the zoning to determine what type of business would go in there to promote that urban, walkable urbanism.
Other comments? Well, let me make a comment about the information about we have the authority for a development plan. We don't. The Planning Commission does not have the authority to approve or deny a development plan. That's county council, and that goes, but we go forward in a determination as they wrestle through the planning initiatives that are monumental at this point to get to a development agreement, hopefully before final approval and the public meeting where it would be presented. While we don't have that authority, what we heard tonight is a lot of good planning going on in terms of how we're going to address these issues. There's a recognition that we have some monumental hills to climb. We haven't climbed them. We've got promises, we've got a lot of coordination necessary between multiple counties and multiple developers, and a lot of funding that's going to be necessary to right all of the inequities that are going to be created by the traffic building constantly on 170. I too am concerned about the school and being adequate. As an elementary school, it's got a great reputation. I don't want to see that sullied by further compounding overcrowding. I didn't hear anything about expansion of the school site, so I don't think that's part of the initial planning. But certainly to accommodate this walkable urbanism for children would be a paramount issue of concern that I would have in that planning effort. And that is a promise at this point as well. Very difficult promise in the current environment we're in with tax reassessment, bond referendums, Green Space Act, which is enacted, and now a $400+ million school bond referendum. So I think this is, what somebody said, the cart before the horse. I think there's a lot of planning, a lot of planning has to continue to go on. Things need to be worked very closely with the staffs and the developers in concert. The information presented tonight is a demonstration of moving in that area, but I think there's still too many unanswered questions that need to be resolved. In good conscience, I couldn't support moving forward until some of those questions are answered. Any other comments?
I agree, you know, with the kinds of comments that have been said already, and to go back to the last meeting, I mean, I remember saying cart before the horse, and that to me was just sort of the bottom line, and why two of us voted not to let the developers proceed, or not to defer, pardon me. And, you know, and we were outvoted, and that's fine, and, you know, democracy at work, I think it's great, and I appreciate all the neighbors who have come out again, and the development team. But I really think there are just too many ifs. I'm just very uncomfortable with the number of ifs. And I want to praise the planning staff for applying or wanting to develop or hope to learn from the place type overlay. And I think Mark is right. I think, you know, in the sense that the planning staff is looking for new ways to develop compatibly with the neighbors in general in Beaufort County. We're trying, you know, again, you're all doing the best you can. I just think that the PTO in this venue, it's just the wrong place for it. It's the first time, my question last meeting was, is this the first time it's been done and tried in Beaufort County? And I think you said yes. I just think it's the wrong piece of land to encourage that. Or as you put it in the materials, the wrong possibility, the wrong, you know, I think you said the PTO or the Community Development Code expresses the possibility that a PTO can be used here. I guess I have to disagree with that.
Any other comments from commissioners? May I have a motion regarding the zoning map amendment request?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'd make a recommendation to council for denial of the zoning map amendment, rezoning request for 71.54 acres located at 1691 Oklahoma Highway from T2 Rural to T4 Neighborhood Center and T3 Neighborhood using a village place type overlay.
I'll second that.
We have a motion, we have a second. Is there further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All opposed? We have 2. The motion is approved for denial of the zoning map amendment request. Okay, that's it. You planning commission members, please stay here while the room clears. I'm open to nominations for a vice chair for a remaining term.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to nominate Cecily to the position of vice chair.
We have a nomination for Cecily.
McMillan to be,
Do we have a second?
to put a record.
We have a second. Do we have any other nominations? Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
One second. This was in our other meeting. you're proposing that it's just for the remainder of year 2023.
Would be remaining of the term that you're going to be filling from the vacated vice chair.
Oh, I see. So,
And then there will be another election, and when that term's completed.
and that would have been Randolph,
Yes,
which may be, and his term ended what, February?
it would end in February of '24.
It would end in February 24th.
Yeah, I believe.
So it's to the end. That was just.
I believe it's a two-year
It's about
term.
that.
It would be, it's a two-year term. I think he would have been on it a year and several months.
Right, and so in whatever February 2024, we'd have another election. For
Correct.
Vice chair for the 2 years.
For both the vice chair and the chair.
And the chair, right.
Yep.
Right, the vice would be for 1 year, beginning in February, and then in the new elections, and the,
Well, you'd be eligible for a two-year term,
right.
In
for the-
February.
Your chair would be.
my chair and your chair. You only complete his term, which ends in February '24.
Right, exactly. And then after that, in February of '24, we have an election according to, what we were talking about earlier today.
For 2 years.
It says vice 1 year.
No, it is a change from 1 year.
Oh, I see.
That's because the CDC allows, Administrative Chapter 2 allows for two-year terms for chair and vice chair.
Both, okay, great, that's clarity.
Yep.
So that if I accept, I just sort of want to know I'm
Well,
absolutely
you'll get a full briefing.
determined to be vice chair until February.
You'll have more information than you care about, so.
I'm going to need some, remedial help, I think, too. A college degree can only get you so far in this life.
All right, all those in favor of the motion to appoint Cecily McMillan as vice chair of the planning commission for the remaining of term, say, raise your hand. Opposed?
Oh, I guess I
Yeah, we'll get a vote for
vote for
yourself.
myself.
Motion approved. All right.
No, thank you very
All
much.
right, the only last minor piece of business is our next meeting is on a
What, the
Thursday. Mark your calendar, September 7th. And that's it. Is anything else, other business?
Because of Labor Day, right?
Hearing no other business, this meeting is adjourned.
I might.